Welcome back to my channel for a short Leica episode about the new Leica Q3 43, and here I have the Leica Q3 28. And those of you who have not seen my initial introductory video on that brand new Leica Q with a 43mm aposummicron lens, I will post the link down below in the info box so you can look this up. And let's right away address the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the filter problem of the Leica Q3 43. Let's kick this off. Let's do some quick housekeeping. So first of all, if you look at the Q3 43 and the Q3 28, here is the hand grip. I did steal it from the Q3 28 and it has this black finish. I commented on this in my previous video on this new Leica Q3 camera. Turns out now, and I saw it in the material on the accessories for this new camera, that the hand grip dedicated for this one here actually has a gray color, like the leather structure here and the finish on the camera body. And that's quite nice. I think it will match very nicely for the time being. Since the fit is perfect of the hand grip from the Q3 28, I will keep this one on the Q3 43 because I have a lot of work to do with that camera in order to provide more content to you. My second point under housekeeping is a short one. If you like the content I'm posting on my channel, then please subscribe and hit the notification bell, because for me it means the world. It helps to grow the channel. For you it's for free. For me these videos are a lot of work, and if you want to appreciate what I'm doing here, then becoming a subscriber is your best way of expressing that. Alright, let's go right into the topic. What exactly is the filter problem of the Leica Q3 43? And let me start by actually putting these cameras side by side. And I did this in my introductory video on both cameras. And I pointed out, let me remove the lens cap here. This is actually very sticky, which I appreciate. Here is much easier to remove it on the Q3 28. And you see that the dimensions in vertical direction, they're exactly the same. And Leica achieved that, and I praised it in my introductory video, by making the lens hood on the Q3 43 shorter than the lens hood on the Q3 28. Let's quickly unmount them for a moment, because a few people in the comments asked me to do that. So let's unmount this. This is the lens hood here for the Q3 28, and this is the lens hood here for the Q3 43. Let me quickly unmount. Screw it off. All right, here you see. And here you see that lens tube is actually a bit shorter, but it doesn't appear that way because there is a standard Leica protector, a UV filter here mounted on the lens, which is something I do as a standard. If I have valuable gear, valuable lenses, I want to make sure my gear is protected. So I actually mount a UV filter or a clear glass protector, what have you, on that lens, so the lens will never scratch. And if a scratch comes here to the surface, I can just replace the filter, which is much cheaper. You don't see it on the Q3 43. And the reason is the following. It took me a while to figure out what filter I could use on that camera here. And even when I found the filter, it's not a satisfying solution. And that's what I want to discuss in this video. And I'm also curious to hear your comments, your thoughts on that filter problem of the Leica Q3 43. Let's quickly compare the two lens hoods. So that's the one from the 43mm and that's the one from the 28mm. And you see here clearly that this one here is longer. And this one is shorter because the lens here is a little bit longer, because we compare a 43mm focal length with a 28mm focal length. Now, why was it so difficult for me to find a protector, a filter on that camera? The reason is that the space between the lens tube and this shorter lens hood is so small that hardly any filter is fitting into it. And even when I found a filter that fits into it, the solution is by far not ideal. So let me demonstrate this to you. First of all, let's get the Q3 28 a little bit out of the way here, because I need that lens hood later in my presentation. Let's look at the standard filters we have here. Let's go to the Leica filter. So this one here is the usual UV filter E49, Leica branded, Leica made, what have you. This is the original filter which I typically use on Leica M mount lenses, on SL lenses, and also on the Q cameras. And it's exactly the same, by the way, which is built here into the Q3 28. If you look here, it says Leica camera Wetzlar. and here it has the E49 UVA Mark II, and it also has a product number here. So that's exactly that filter here. And if I want to mount that, I get to limitations very, very quickly. Let me do this here for you, live in front of the camera. So let's mount this, let's screw it in. And now if I take that shorter lens hood here and start to screw it in, you will very quickly hear a scratching noise. This is all normal. You hear the difference? Here it's normal. And then it starts to scratch because the filter is already reaching the end of the inner part of that lens hood here. And so this one is definitely too thick. It doesn't fit, it doesn't work. So let's unmount it. Let's get it back into the box because these are valuable filters, so I don't want to waste it. Let's put it back. Now, I tried a lot of filters on my way through that problem here. So I had, for instance, here one from Sirui, and that one also scratched after a while. I was able to screw in this lens hood here a bit more far than what I was able to do on the original Leica filter, but I didn't come to the end and the lens hood was not sitting firmly. I also tried a Zeiss filter here. So this is one from Carl Zeiss. Let me try to open this. This one here is substantially thinner already, but it didn't work. No chance to get this shorter lens hood screwed in completely so that it sits firmly and also is adjusted straightforward in the way it should be. I also tried here one from Fuji, Becoming Desperate. So this is the protection filter for the X100 Mark V, 6 and so on, which you need in a kit in order to protect the lens and the whole camera and make it weather resistant. And then you also can use this one here. This one was also too thick. Let me show you. It didn't work. Now let's get this off. Let's get this out. See, this is almost the dimension of the original Leica filter. No chance to screw the lens hood on the lens with that filter screwed into the lens. So the problem is not 49mm. There are plenty of 49mm filters in the market. The problem is they are all too thick. And then finally I found one which actually worked for me. I don't know if you can see this here. So this is an Hama Professional L-Protect HTMC white, and the filter thread is 49mm. It's a UV filter, and I will post the link down below in the info box. And I heard from Leica there are a couple of other filters who are thin enough that it just works. Look at that. This is really thin compared to what I had in my hands before. Let's now screw the filter into the lens tube here. Never overdo this, otherwise you will not be able to unmount the filter. And then let's get the lens hood and screw it on. This sounds much better. You see, I have much more turns and no scratching noise so far. Smooth. And it clicks in. So this is the only filter I found which I was possible to mount, and I'm talking about filters I have here in the studio. But I ordered a couple of other filters and happy to post them in a subsequent video when I verified that they really work. But the filters need to be ultra thin in order to fit between the lens tube and this lens hood here, which is just very short. If you compare them again here, let's have a look. Look at that. You see the difference, right? And this one here, this filter here from Hama, this doesn't do any harm to this lens hood, because if it scratches heavily and you apply force, of course, the lens hood might get scratches inside. And that's not the case with this filter, so this really works. You see, this is clean, no scratches, no damage to the lens hood from inside. And I like that solution. Now, the problem is, if you look at the macro mode, right? The macro mode gets enabled by rotating the macro ring here. I showed this in my introductory video on the Q3 43. And if you do that, you see that the lens tube comes out because it gets the lens ready for close-up shots. Look at that. You see how the lens tube is coming out by another couple of millimeters, and that unfortunately is too much, has no space in that short lens hood. So let's illustrate this. Let's get this on again. Clicks in. This looks good, and my lens, my Aposummicron 43mm is protected. But now when I try to rotate the macro ring, I'll not overdo it here. Here's end of story, you see? This is how much space I have inside for the lens tube to move, which by the way also shows me that this lens hood will not get damaged by this filter. There is still some play inside. some space between the filter and the lens hood. But that's end of story. I cannot go into the macro mode for close-up shots if that filter is mounted. And that's of course far from being ideal. Now, I'm sure there will be smart people watching this video saying, what forces you to take the lens hood of the Q3 43? Just take the one from the Q3 28, and here the lens hood is longer, so you will have space for macro mode and even space for filters which are not as ultra thin as this Hama Professional filter here. So I tried that. Guess what happens? Let's screw it on. It fits. It's a perfect fit, no problem. But unfortunately, it's not calibrated to get straight in the way it should be, and it gets stuck here on half the way. And that's, in my opinion, ugly. That's not a good solution. Now, of course, I can activate the macro mode. Have a look here. Works. But do I really want to have my lens hood sitting in that way on the Leica Q3 43? Definitely not. That's not the way it should be. So this is also not a solution. The last thought I had on that topic is maybe Leica offers an additional accessory which then provides space for the macro mode. And indeed, Leica is offering in different colors a lens hood as an additional accessory to the Leica Q3 43. But unfortunately, these lens hoods are in the same construction as some for the Leica M series. And if you mount this, you will no longer have an option for a lens cap in front of the camera here. So you will no longer be able to put a lens cap on. And that is also not ideal, because it means that dust, you know, maybe moisture, what have you, will reach that filter and you will have to clean it all the time, and it is not protected. So there is no ideal solution at this point in time. And I have to confess, it took me really a while, as I mentioned before, to figure out what filter could actually fit in here at all. But then the macro mode is dead. Boom, see, this is end of story. No chance to use the macro mode. So now we have to make a decision. Do we want to protect that lens with a filter, or do we want to have access to the macro mode? I will actually use this camera for the time being without a filter, or maybe I manage to find an even more ultra thin filter. As I mentioned before, I ordered a couple of filters from retailers to see if they maybe do the trick. But I have doubts that it is possible to use in parallel a filter and the macro mode. And I don't want to make that decision. I don't want to be forced to avoid the macro mode. I use the macro mode actually quite often because I'm a fan of taking images of insects, flowers, you know, small subjects. And I will just not use a filter on that lens and will accept that there is currently no way to protect my lens. Now, is it super dangerous? I don't think so, because these type of constructions with a lens hood like this make it highly unlikely that there will be scratches on the lens. And I think is not a big risk I'm taking here if I don't use a protector against my usual habits on that lens. So for the time being, I'm not aware of any smart workaround to this filter problem of the Leica Q3 43mm. And it seems almost to me, but I'm not judgmental here, that Leica engineers paid a lot of attention to keeping the dimensions of these two cameras, also here in vertical direction, exactly the same. Solve this by making the lens hood here shorter, because a 43mm by nature is a bit longer than a 28mm lens, but maybe have overlooked that in this way it becomes impossible to use filters which are standard size, or you use ultra thin filters, but then still the macro mode is blocked. And filters mean sometimes the world to photographers, because you also need neutral density filters. You might want to use a polar filter. It's not only of protecting a lens, it's also about functionality and features. And now, of course, I'm curious about your thoughts about that filter problem of the new Q3 43mm. Do you use filters on that camera? Did you find already ultra thin filters which match and work inside the lens hood, basically getting stuck between the lens tube and the lens hood? Or will you not use filters at all because the macro functionality means something to you and you want to use it? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about that, so please drop me a comment and let me know. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel, there's always more to come. Thanks for watching, stay safe and healthy, and of course, peace out.